our third installment of this new series that we're giving called Modern Masters. Now, in the first installment, we talked about the Rebbe of Piasetzna, the last Hasidic master in the Warsaw Ghetto. Last week, we met two personalities, including the Piasetzna Rebbe's brother-in-law, the Avodas Elazar of Kuznets. And because we were pressed for time, because I had a meeting that I had to run to, and I gave a shorter shiur last week, we're going to continue a little bit, even though I said we're going to learn from Rabbi Moshe Wolfson this week. We're going to learn from Rabbi Moshe Wolfson next week. We're going to continue a little bit with another very, very important idea and teaching from the Rebbe of Kuznets, the Avodas Elazar of Kuznets, Rabbi Yisrael Elazar Hapstein of Kuznets, who made Aliyah to Israel in the 1920s, helped to found Kfar Hasidim, which was conceptualized as a Hasidic farming village near Haifa, which was a failed enterprise and ends up being taken over by the Poale Mizrahi, the religious Zionists, who saved the Yishuv. And today, Kfar Hasidim exists today, but I don't think there are very many Hasidim, if any Hasidim, that live there today. There are religious people out there, but not. There's a yeshiva. There's like a whole Litvish yeshiva community there. Kitzer, we're going to learn from a little bit more. He dies in 1966. His grandson is the current Rebbe of Kuznets, and the base medrash still exists in downtown Tel Aviv, where you can go daven, and it's one of the minion factories in Tel Aviv, actually. And he splits his time, the grandson, between Tel Aviv and the Upper West Side of Manhattan. So he's a very cosmopolitan Hasidic Rebbe, I guess you could say. And Kitzer, we're going to learn from the grandfather, who, of course, is the great-grandson of the Maggid of Kuznets, Rabbi Yisrael Hapstein of Kuznets. And we're going to get to his teaching in a few moments, but in order to prepare us and put us in the right frame of mind for this incredible teaching from the Avodas Elazar of Kuznets, we have to first look back at last week's Sedra, okay? In last week's Sedra, we know is Lech Lecha. Kadosh Baruch Hu speaks to Avram and tells Avram, he's still Avram, he's not Avraham yet, right? You're going to leave behind, you're going to go to the land that I'm going to show you, and it's going to be for your own good, and you're going to leave behind everything that's familiar to you, and you're going to go to the land that I'm going to show you, and when you get there, your name is going to become great. Okay, and anyone who blesses you will, through you, all the world will be blessed. And anyone who blesses you will be blessed. Anyone who curses you will be cursed. And then we're told that Avram took his wife and he took Lot, his cousin, okay, and his nephew, and he took all the wealth that he acquired, Ve'eta nefesh asher asu v'charan, and the soul that he created in Haran. So what does that mean? So in order to understand these opening psukim, we're going to take a look at a few very famous Rashis. They're going to set the tone for this piece from the Avodas Elazar that I want to get to. So of course, first the pasuk begins, Vayom Hashem el Avram, Lech Lecha, which sounds what? Redundant. What's Lech Lecha? You shall go, Lecha, you. So the Rashi tells us, Hanatcha Tavatcha. You're going to go and it's going to be for your own benefit. Sham eschag legoy gadol. There you become a great people, a great nation. Kan iyatazoch levanim. And here in Chutz La'aretz, you're not going to merit to have children. V'od shodia tivacha b'olam. Not only that, your true nature will be revealed to the entire world only when what? When you come to this land. So for Avram to become whom he's truly meant to be, he needs to leave behind everything that was familiar to him and come to this land. Okay. And then it tells us, and your name will become great. So what does that mean? So Rashi tells us that it's an allusion to the fact that what? That Hashem is going to add a letter to his name, right? He's no longer going to be known as Avraham. He's going to become Avraham, okay? Avram, Avraham. So how does that make his name great? Okay, you could say, well, it's going to make your name bigger because one more letter. What does it mean it's going to make your name great? So Rashi continues and gives a clue, by the way. The Avraham ole Ramach. And Avraham, in Gematria, corresponds to the number 248, which corresponds to what? Keneged Evara Shalom, all the parts of a human body. So, okay, Rashi seems to suggest what? That Avram's name is changed to Avraham, somehow connoting that now he's a complete human being. That it now corresponds, the name Avraham, 248, corresponds to the 248 parts of a human being. What that means, we're going to get to in just a moment. Okay, so now let's turn our pages. Before, just again, to set the stage for this, as I said to a few people, that this will be a very, very different understanding of what Avraham's mission was all about and what it means that Avraham became complete. In order to get to this idea that it's going to be introduced by the Kashrutzer Rebbe and then magnified even greater in the works of Rav Kook, which we're hopefully going to get to as well, we first need to take a step back, and we're going to learn from two earlier sources. We're going to begin with the Rebbe of Radomsk, okay, who lived in the 19th century, the Tiferet Shlomo, Rabbi Shlomo HaKohen of Radomsk. And this is text number 3 on our sheets. And he says, what does it mean that Rashi says that by going to the land, it'll be for his own benefit? Yochol lefaresh davar, mahana hayat tzarich l'Avram Avinu. You could ask and say what? What benefit did Avram Avinu need? What was he lacking? Halo ein machzor l're'av. He wasn't lacking anything. He was already wealthy. He was already successful. He was already renowned. What else did he need? Achein hine zeu midas shel Avram Avinu al Hashem. Lashpia rav chesed la'olam. Oh, so the first thing we learn, says the Rebbe of Radomsk, is what? That Avram Avinu wasn't satisfied with the fact that he was successful or that he had wealth. What did Avram Avinu care about? Having influence on the world and making a difference in the world, making the world a better place through chesed, through kindness. V'zehu lo hana sheyichlu hachasadim lipashet. Okay, and that therefore, what would be beneficial to him? What would be pleasing to him? That the opportunity for him to do chesed would spread and spread and spread. Ike amar lo lech lecha mi'artzecha miladcha lashpil chol v'zeh yahanatcha v'tovatcha. That's why Hashem says to him, leave behind your birthplace and what's familiar to you and go to this land. Why? Because that's going to allow you to continue to spread your influence throughout the world. V'kulam yiyu shavim etzlecha kamo b'nei mishpatecha. And anyone you meet and have an influence on, an impact, will be considered to you like what? Like your own family. So here is, in this beautiful teaching from the Rebbe of Radomsk, here is a description of the motivation that Hashem is trying to instill in Avraham. Hashem sees Avraham's nature, knows Avraham's nature, and Hashem is trying to instill with him and encourage him that by leaving behind his current mitziyut, his current reality and situation, he'll be able to have even more influence and make the world a better place through chesed. Okay, that's the first idea. Now we're going to see the Rambam. Very interesting in Hilchos Avodah Zarah. Okay, the Rambam this is the Rambam in the Mishnah Torah, by the way, not in the Moreh Nevuchim. The Moreh Nevuchim is usually looked at as the Rambam's primary work of theology and philosophy. This is the Rambam in the Mishnah Torah, where he talks about the laws of idolatry and the ways of the other nations of the world. And this is text number 4. And the Rambam talks about who was it that taught the world that there's one Hashem, and we have to worship that Hashem, Avram Avinu. Now look what he says. Uven 40 shana hakir Avram et boro. Avram was 40 years old when it became clear to him that there was one God, one Creator. Keilan sheikir v'yada hitchil hashit shuvot al b'nei or kastim la'roch idinim ahem v'lomer she'en zo derech ha'emet she'atem hochim ba v'shibar atzlamim v'itchil l'odir la'am she'en roi la'avod ela l'loha olam v'lo roi l'ishtachavot l'akriv l'naseich kedei she'kiru kol abruim habayim. Okay. So he says Avram Avinu was 40 years old when he recognized and realized that there's one true God, when he had that revelation. And then he immediately starts to do what in Or Kasdim? To teach the world about it. And he becomes a crusader for this idea there's one God. Okay, not only does he start teaching people and pointing it out, and there's only God is the one true God is the one that's worthy to serve and to offer offerings to and to bow down before. But more than that, what else does he do? He breaks all the tzlamim. He breaks all their idols. Okay. And that continues. V'roy la'abed la'shaber kol hatzirot kedei shelo yitu bahen kol ha'am kamo elu shem yidamim she'en sham elaha ela elu. And he says it's important for us to leave and break all the images that we have, okay, in order that people should be able to come to perceive that there's only one God and no other God but Him. Kevan shegvar aleim briotav bikesh hamelech largo. And when the Melech and Or Kasdim saw what? The influence that he had on other people, he wanted to have him killed. Okay? And a miracle happened, he was able to leave and go to Haran. And already in Haran, he began to what? Call out and teach the world that there's only one God. Okay? And therefore, it's only He that's appropriate for us to serve. And he went continued to do this throughout all his wanderings until he finally comes to Eretz Israel, and he is able to call out to the whole world that there's only one God, and we have to serve that one God. That's how the Rambam describes Avram Avinu and his journey and his mission in the laws of Avodah Zarah in the Mishnah Torah. With all this as our introduction, I now want to learn what to me was an incredibly powerful piece from the Avodah Zarah of Kajnitz. That's an insightful piece, an original piece about who Avram Avinu was, about the journey of Avram Avinu, and about the legacy of Avram that we're meant to emulate and learn from. Okay, so we're going to learn this piece together. This is text number 5 on our sheets. And listen to what he says, the Rabbi. And let's talk about the pasuk that we spoke about earlier. The pasuk, and your name shall become great. Hareini mosif ot al shemcha. I'll add a letter to your name. Shalach shav shemcha Avram. Up till this point, your name was Avram. Mikam ve'elech Avraham. And from here on out, you'll be called Avraham. V'Avraham ole ramach keneged evarav shel Adam. That's our Rashi. And the name Avraham corresponds to the number 248, corresponding to the parts of the human body. Okay. So that's Rashi. Now listen to what the Rebbe does with this Rashi. The second paragraph in text number 5. V'hine yadua hachiluk shebein hatoar ram l'toar gavoa o gadol. Okay, and he says we know, or we need to know and clarify the difference between calling something ram, which means lofty, or calling something great, or gadol, or large. Okay? Ki hatoar gavoa o gadol, big or great, mora al gvaot v'gadlut. Okay, when something is called big or large, it's talking about something that's physically big or large. Az kazu sheyesh la shaychut el hanamuch ve'ashefel mimenu. In other words, this cup can only be called large or tall, let's say, bigger in height, compared to this piece of paper, which is namuch, is lower, is less than. Okay, everyone understand the mashal he gives? So he says, Ba'od shato aram. But to call something ram, which means lofty, okay, it means what? Something that's great and beyond any kind of actual comprehension. Okay? There's ram, means to be great and beyond our comprehension, and gadol or gavoa means that it's something that's large or big, a big idea that we can relate to somehow, that we can grasp, that we can understand. Everyone with me so far? So now let's continue. V'hine Avram Avinu nikra shemo mitchila Avram. And Avraham Avinu, when he begins his career, his name is Avram. What do those words Av and Ram mean? Av means father, and Ram means, like I said, of this loftiness, this lofty God. Okay, Kilomar Avram. That is to say, he was the father of Ram. Av l'shitazu shakadosh baruch hu Ram. He was the father. He's the first one to introduce this idea to the world that not only there's one God, but there's one God that's beyond this world, that exists beyond, that's transcendent, that exists beyond our physical reality. Okay, that's how he begins his career. But what happens? Okay, Kimi'az amdu al dato yadahu shakadosh baruch hu mukhtar b'torah. Until that point, it became clear to him what, or from that, and he understood that Hashem exists through this idea of Ramamus. That Hashem exists beyond us. That God is transcendent beyond our physical realm. All right. Aval achar kach kishe'amik lachshov b'inyan gila sheyesh hashgacha pratit b'olam. But when he began to really learn and think about it, it became clear to him what? That God is not separate from this world. God might be beyond our grasp and comprehension, and therefore there is an idea of Ramamus Hashem, that Hashem is lofty and beyond us. But if Hashem was completely disconnected from this world, then what would happen to this world? This world wouldn't exist. There's an idea of Hashgacha Pratit, that Hashem is supervising and orchestrating everything that exists in this world and in existence. Okay, and that's true. V'ush amru Chazal, sheroeh bira doleket. That what happened? How did Avram come to this conclusion? That he saw a candle burning. V'lo sheyesh birastam, and he realized that a candle doesn't just burn on its own. And through this understanding that a candle can't just burn on its own, okay, he said, well, how does everything in existence exist? Okay, just like a candle can't burn on its own, we can't exist on our own. Something had to light us, like we lit that candle. Something had to light us, had to put that in Ner Hashem Nishmat Adam, right? That Hashem had to light the proverbial candle that is the soul of every human being. Ulechein nishtana shemo me'Avram li'Avraham, and that's why his name was changed from Avram to Avraham. Okay, he begins his career with what we'll call it a superficial understanding of what God, who God is, how we relate to Hashem, and how Hashem relates to us. Okay, simple monotheism, that there's the God out there somewhere. Okay, that's how he begins his career. But now, seemingly, the name change connotes what? An evolution in Avram's understanding as well, and an evolution in terms of how we're meant to relate to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. V'yesh b'davar mida keneged mida, kevan shakir Avram Avinu b'kach, shakadosh Baruch Hu lo ram ela gadol. Since Avraham Avinu grows in his understanding, okay, evolves in his understanding that God doesn't just exist biramamus, removed, transcendent from us, but that God exists bigadlut, as we said. We can only relate to the greatness of God because God is somehow imminently present in our lives, okay? When he makes that switch and understands that paradox, that God is both biramamus as well as bigadlus, everyone following me? That God exists both transcendent from us as well as imminently present. These two that seemingly are contradictory ideas, transcendence and immanence, right? But the reality is that's the reality. Kadosh Baruch Hu is both transcendent and imminently present in our lives. And once Avram Avinu evolves in his understanding, says the Rabbi, Zocha Shakadosh Baruch Hu Amar Elav V'Yagavah Shemecha, that your name will also be great. It's a mida keneged mida. When his relation to understanding of Kadosh Baruch Hu evolves and becomes more sophisticated and great, so too, mida keneged mida, your name is going to change as in recognizing that you've evolved as a spiritual being. mida'ato ki HaKadosh Baruch Hu hamisavev u'manig et kol ha'teva zachlahu shne'amar alav v'yeh bracha. And so too, once he comes to that realization that HaKadosh Baruch Hu doesn't just exist beyond us, but that he's literally one responsible and orchestrating everything that exists in nature and in our reality and in all reality, because he comes to that realization, Hashem says to him, you'll be blessed. Okay? Upershu Chazal, shebezeh brachot nimasu biyado, l'chol asher yivarech mivurach. And anyone who, not only that he will be blessed, and that all will be blessed through him, but anyone who blesses him will also be blessed. Va'anam, but he says, Dargo zuhi ashlemut ba'adam. This level of spiritual consciousness represents being a complete, evolved human being. Okay, up till this point, Avram was not complete. He was somehow incomplete because he didn't have this evolved understanding of how we're really meant to relate to HaKadosh Baruch Hu and how Hashem exists in our reality. Up till now, we had a very superficial understanding of who God is, what God is, how we relate to Hashem. But now that he's evolved, he seemingly, says the Rabbi, become a more complete human being. He's a more complete spiritual being. He's a more evolved being. Okay? Shemakir v'chai b'hakara ki ein davar na'aseh b'riah b'briah b'bli hashgachato shel Baruch Hu. Because he's evolved to understand that nothing can exist without what? Hashem's role in that in that item coming to fruition. Ulazeh romez Hashem Avraham. And this is what's alluded to by the name Avraham. Shehu b'gematria Ramach. Because it corresponds in gematria, in numerical value, to 248. Keneged Evar Sha'adam, representing what? The entirety of all the parts of a human being. The Rameh Shal Yidei Zeh Zacha Avraham Shenikra Adam Hashalem, to teach us that it's at that point that Avraham is now called what? A complete human being. Before this, what? When he had that superficial understanding of God, and he taught the world of that superficial understanding of God, then what? He was Avram. He becomes Avraham because that evolution in his understanding and the messaging that he shared with others has now come into existence, and therefore he's now, Hashem is teaching us, at least according to the Avodas Elazar of Kashnetz, by changing Avram's name to Avraham, to demonstrate that Avraham is now a more complete human being. Because he has that heightened spiritual consciousness and awareness, he is now complete. Everyone with me so far?
But is he saying the only reason he added the hay was to get it to the gematria?
No, but he's not saying that. But he's saying that there's a transition that goes on in Avraham's relation to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and that can be learned from the fact that his name has changed. Okay, it's a very, very deep piece, a very different piece, right? In terms of anything we ever thought of, and we're going to see this. By the way, we're going to learn in a few minutes from Rav Kook. Rav Kook, in numerous chapters in Orota Kodesh, shares very similar ideas. Okay, Rav Kook, as we know, wrote many. So he's the second modern master we're going to learn from today. We just learned from the Rabbi of Kashnetz. Rav Kook, in many very, very deep, even mystical teachings in Orota Kodesh, he talks about this idea as well, that the idea of that there's two ways, or what Rav Kook kind of couches as a paradox, the idea of Romamus Hashem, that Hashem is transcendent and beyond our comprehension and our capacity to fully grasp and understand, but at the same time, how Hashem is imminently present, right? And that seems like a paradox. And we're going to learn from Rabbi Shlomo Aviner, who's one of the great teachers of the Torah of Rav Kook, in this short piece. And then we're going to learn one last short piece of Rav Kook as well. This is text 6. Rav Aviner is going to bring together like a synopsis of several teachings from Rav Kook in this one little paragraph. And he says as follows. Hashkafa monotheistit, text number 6.
Page 3.
Text number 6. Hashkafa monotheistit ashtachit So Veret Shalom Nutak Mi Ribbon Shalom. Ribbon Shalom Yoshe B'Tzad Ve'enu Mitarev. It's a simple, fundamental monotheism suggests what? That God is separate from the world. Okay, and God sits on the side. He created the world, but then he sits on the side and lets the world play out, and he doesn't mix in. Okay, that's simple, fundamental monotheism. That there was a God who created the world and created the mechanisms of the world to continue to exist and run and flow. But now God sits on the side and doesn't mix in, and it's up to us to either fix the world or destroy the world. That's simple monotheism. But we believe, as Jews, what? That God existed before the world, and He's beyond the world. Adon olam asher malach materen kol yitzini ra. V'chein v'acharei kichlot hakol levado yimloch nara. Atahu ad shelo nivra olam. It was God. God was God before, when He didn't create, before He created the world. Atahu kishenivra olam. And God is the only God even since creation. Okay. So now listen to how Rav Aviner explains this very important concept. God transcendenti, v'gad immanenti. God is both transcendent as well as immanent. It's that paradox that we spoke of. Ribono she'olam ninsa b'chol metziot. God is found in all of existence. Michayeh kol metziut. He gives life to all of existence. Umikayem kol metziut. And he sustains everything that exists. Okay? Kasher nivra olam hu matzah lo pinaktana bitoch ribono shalom kavyochol. That is to say that since He created the world, okay, He placed the world in one little corner within that all-encompassing unity that we call the divine. Okay, ribono shalom hu mikamo shalom. Oh, sorry, skip ahead. Sorry. Low pantheism. This is not pantheism. Pantheism is what? Hakol hu elhut, that everything is God. Ella, listen to the word that Rav Kook, this is the word that Rav Kook coins and uses. Ella panentheism. Hakol hu bi elahut. Okay, rather what we call panentheist. What is panentheism? That everything exists within the divine and from the divine. There's pantheists, which are what? Everything is divine. And there's panentheism, which means that everything comes from the divine, exists within the divine. Okay? Now he's going to explain this, don't worry. Ribono shalom hu mikamo shalom lo b'muvana geography, ele b'muvana ruchani. God is the source of the world, not in terms of geographically, that He's the address, but rather in the spiritual sense. Ribono shalom hu mikamo shalom mikayem et olam u'michayeh et olam. God is the source of the world. He's the sustainer of the world. He gives life to the world. Or Hashem mikaleh b'nimsaim b'chol davar ba'olam yesh nitzosh chiyoniot Elohit. And everything that exists in the world, okay, there's a spark of divine light within it, divine life within it. Okay, so let's just bring this all together. You probably all heard the expression in Hebrew that Hashem is referred to as the Bakol, Mikol, Kol. Has everyone's heard that expression? Right? What does the word Bakol mean? What does the word Bakol mean? Within all. Mikol, what does Mikol mean? Not Bakol like with a kuf. Okay? Kol, the word within all. What does Mikol mean? Okay? Kol. So listen to this. Bakol means that everything exists Bakol. Everything exists within the great oneness that is God. Okay? Mikol, everything that is in existence emanates and comes from the great oneness that is Kol, that is God. Kol. Everything is God. Bakol, Mikol, Kol. So Judaism, and this is what Avraham Avinu realizes. Judaism is not simple monotheism, as explained by Rav Kook, and as explained by the Avodas Elazar, and as explained by Rav Aviner, explaining Rav Kook. Okay, Judaism is not simple monotheism. Okay, Avraham Avinu's legacy begins as simple monotheism, that there's a God up there, Avram. Okay, but he evolves. Judaism is not monotheism. Monotheism says there's the God who created the world, and then lets us fight it out and destroy or save the world on our own. I think all of us that have lived through the past several months and some of the things we've experienced that both have been horrendous as well as miraculous can recognize that we see the Yad Hashem in existence. We see Hashem. Hashem hasn't abandoned us. Hashem is there with us. Hashem is imminently present. Okay, those two horrendous nights where we didn't know what was going to be coming our way from Iran, and that not a dent was made to us. You have to see the Yad Hashem. You have to believe Hashem is imminently present. Okay, so back to Avram Avinu, just to begin to bring this all together. So Avram Avinu, just to review, begins his career, teaching about this idea that there's one God, simple monotheism. He exists. This idea of Ramamus Hashem, that Hashem exists beyond this world, transcendent beyond this world, and that there's one God. But then he evolves and he starts realizing and teaching this idea of godless Hashem, that Hashem is great, not just because he's beyond us and beyond our comprehension, but because Hashem is imminently present in our lives. We have Hashkacha. Hashem orchestrates everything that exists. Everything comes from Hashem. And that's what he begins to teach. So if we're meant to emulate the legacy of Avram Avinu, so what does that mean for us? How can we begin to live up to Avram's spiritual legacy? What does it mean to inspire others like Avram Avinu to come to that ultimate, more evolved, more sophisticated relationship with Hashem? If you think about this, there probably many of us have family members, friends, people we know that are very cynical about God, that feel, I can't believe in a God that's up there, an old man in the sky, right? We've all heard this. So how do we live up to the legacy of Avram Avinu? How can we begin to teach people about a more sophisticated relationship with Hashem? Does it mean we have to go out and lecture? Does it mean we have to get on a soapbox? So I want to learn together a Sfas Emes that I think the Gary Rabbi that I think we mentioned 2 weeks ago in the Shir outside. We're going to learn together inside about the mitzvah of Yahavta l'reacha kamocha, right? And the Sfas Emes basically tells us, and it's a question that's been asked a million times, that Yahavta, what does that mean? Love your neighbor like yourself. And the Sfas Emes basically sets up the famous question. Well, if the Torah doesn't define for us what it means to love ourselves, and the only measure of loving our neighbor is V'yahavta l'reacha kamocha, love your neighbor like you love yourself, how do we ever know if we fulfill the mitzvah of loving our neighbor? Everyone follow the question? V'yahavta l'reacha kamocha, but Hashem doesn't tell me how to love myself, so how do I know if I ever fulfill the mitzvah of loving my neighbor? So we're going to learn a beautiful Sfas Emes together. This is text number 7. And then we're going to learn a one-liner from Rav Kook that's going to bring this all together. V'yahavta l'reacha kamocha parasha lashon poel yotzei v'kayal avat Hashem ki heicha matzinu sheyehiv adam et atzmo sheyomar kamocha. So he says this, V'yahavta l'reacha kamocha is telling us something very important. It's telling us what? That we should have impact on others. That they should come to what? To love Hashem. Listen to this brilliant insight of the Sfas Emes. The Sfas Emes says, V'yahavta, how do we learn that pasuk? V'yahavta, we can put a comma there. The mitzvah of V'yahavta, which is what? V'yahavta es Hashem, love, the mitzvah to love God, should be l'reacha, for your neighbor, as it is kamocha, for you. If we live a life that we're in love with God, if we live a life where we feel Hashem's, where we live that paradox, where on one hand we're in awe of Hashem that's beyond our comprehension, on the other hand we're in love with Hashem because He's imminently present in our lives, and we condition ourselves to see His presence and His influence in our lives, then others will want to do the same. Raka perush lahevet Hashem l'reacha kamolacha. Rather, the parish is that the love of God should be for your neighbor like it is for you. As Chazal teach us, v'yahavta et Hashem liyot shem shamayim mitayev al yadecha. What does it mean to love God? The love of heaven should come from the works of your hands. Ukemosha adam yagei atzmo lachnis avat Hashem b'libo. And just as a person has to work hard to allow love of God to enter into his heart, his own heart, ken yachnis avat Hashem b'leiv chaveiro. So too he has to what? Strive to encourage the love of God into the hearts of his friend and his neighbor. L'chein amru shehu klal gadol b'Torah. And that's why Rabbi Akiva taught us that this idea of Yahavta l'recha kamocha is klal gadol b'Torah. The legacy of Avram Avinu is the ability and capacity to live a life of a more sophisticated understanding of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, to live a life of spiritual consciousness, to live a life of passion, to live a life that is enriched by knowing that Hashem is indeed with us, to live a life of that paradox of, on one hand, being in awe of the fact that Hashem is beyond our complete comprehension, but on the other hand, being able to see the Yad Hashem imminently present in our lives. And to live that paradox, and if we live that paradox with excitement and with fervor and with love, so then we'll be able to live up to the legacy of Avram Avinu, who was able to influence others, not because he lectured them, and not because, as the Rambam says, because he broke their idols. That's not why he had Ashpa. He had Ashpa because he had a more sophisticated understanding of Hashem, and he was in love with Hashem. So I just want to end with one last liner for Rav Kook. Okay, Rav Kook in Orot HaKodesh, in the introduction to a very important chapter in Orot HaKodesh called the Achdut HaKolelet, the complete or the universal, all-inclusive oneness. And Rav Kook says, Achdut HaKolelet Elahit HaSodit, Hi HaKol Be'elahut, HaMit'aleh HaGshama VaRivoy B'yichud Elyon. Rav Kook says that the all-inclusive divine oneness is fundamentally about what? Acknowledging that all exists. Okay, everything that exists in the world around us, in the universe, exists within the divine. It's the capacity for us to elevate our consciousness, to perceive and share that awareness of the great oneness through all of existence. And so that's the challenge. Jews are not monotheists. Based on everything we learned together, I know that may shock you, based on everything we learned together this morning from these two great modern masters, Rav Kook and the Rabbi of Kushnitz, Jews who are the Bnei Avraham, were the children of Avram, were the descendants of Avram, were meant to live up to Avram's legacy of living that paradox. On one hand, recognizing that there's the concept of Rambus Hashem, that Hashem is beyond our complete comprehension, and simultaneously being blessed to recognize and see Hashem's presence imminently in our lives. And that's what we call godless Hashem. And so this, I think, I can see from some of the faces that this is something that's new to many of us, but it's something that's very fundamentally important. And understand.
An example of this? I mean, I understand what you're saying, but I don't really get it because
Example
I
of.
don't see the example of how he was different in when he
Again, the language that's used here is that there's an idea of just acknowledging there's a God, and that God, to quote Rav Aviner, that God created the world and then left the world on its own. Okay, it's like if we make it what?
It's very Greek.
Right. Okay, that's classical monotheism, right? There'll be to give an example. Now, let's say I make a painting, okay, and I make a painting and I leave that painting on a wall and I never touch it again. So I create the painting, and then if the painting starts to get moldy or starts to fade, it's on its own. Once I create it, it's on its own. But if I see the painting starting to fade or get moldy, and I get involved and I do restoration on it, okay, then I'm allowing that painting to continue to exist. So the difference, using that mashal, and the transition is that Avram went, not only in his own consciousness, that there's a God that created us, okay, to what? That God not only created us, but continues to manage everything that he created.
It seems to me the I think that's where the difference is.
That's one difference, but again, this is what the Avodas Lazar says so vividly is that there's an evolution in his consciousness and his understanding and his relationship, and embracing that paradox. Okay, and I think that's something that we need to work. It's again, we throw around these terms: monotheist, panentheist, pantheist. We need to work on that paradox. That on one hand, we have to acknowledge that there are things about God and Hashem is beyond any human comprehension. On the other hand, we have to see clearly that Hashem is imminently present in our lives. Yes?
There's a bit of a time lapse because when Hashem first speaks to Abraham, I'll make your name great, that's when he's about 75 years old. And he changes as the hay right for the bris when he's presumably 99. What's the...
So it's a remez. It's the fact that he's going to change his name. That's the Rashi. Right? Good question. Yeah, that's all part of the evolution. That because he comes to that point, that's why he's zocha that one day his name is going to be changed. Right? Shkach. Next week.
Where's the Rav Kook that you quoted
In Oras HaKodesh. The introduction to Oras. It's not in the daf. That's why I read it out.
What's the yisod that he says?
I said, just let me make the announcement so we don't hear people. Okay, next week, I'm going to be teaching in the 10:30 slot for the next 3 weeks because Rabbi Taub is away. Next week, we're going to hear from a new modern master, not Rav Kook and actually we'll probably do a little bit of Rav Kook also, but not the Avodas Elazar Kashnes. Next week, we're going to hear from Rabbi Moshe Wolfson, Zecher Tzadik Livracha, who passed away just a few months ago. We're going to be learning an incredible piece from Rabbi Wolfson that talks about the mystical connection between Chevron, because next week is Shabbat Chai Yisora, and the connection to Chevron, and the connection between Chevron and the parallels to be drawn between Chevron and Yerushalayim. And it's a very, very beautiful piece of Rabbi Wolfson that we're going to learn together next week at 10:30.